Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mo. Excited to be here.
One of the topics you are an expert on, and you are, oh my gosh, so highly credentialed. But one of the topics you're an expert on is quick money tricks for women. I want to know the tricks, but first, let's define the term money tricks for women, because where I'm from, that means something different. I'm pretty sure.
Well, we mean this in the purest, most positive way possible. let me first put out.
Just want to be clear.
Oh yes, let's make that clear for our listening audience and viewing audience. So listen, these are just tips that I've developed, through trial and error, frankly, through observation, through experience, about ways that I've shored up my net worth and shored up my financial stability and financial wellness. So when I say quick money tricks, that's what I'm talking about, ladies, nothing else. So the first one is something Dr. Mo, my mother always told me, but it really took me a long time to understand practically what that meant. And that is pay yourself first. Okay, so pay yourself first. And the way that I've done that, the practical application of that for me has been, if I get 100% of my paycheck in my hands or in my bank account, psychologically, I will think that I have 100% of my money to spend however I see fit on expenses, on bills, on things I want, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So for me, practically and psychologically, it's been easiest to, through direct deposit, divert substantial portions of my money, 10, 20, sometimes 30%, if I can afford it at any given point in time, to money market accounts, to high interest yielding savings accounts, to investment accounts, to employer sponsored accounts such as 401k. So women, it's so important to, and people generally, but women in particular, it's so important to develop that mindset of paying yourself first. That's the first thing you do with your money,
and what that means, just to cut in, it does not mean go get you a Birkin bag and some red bottoms, right? Correct. Not buy material things, but that's invest in your future.
That's right. First, your security.
Love your strategy because it never gets into your hands. And for me, invariably, when something happens is something will break. There'll be some kind of emergency. Somebody asks for a loan. So despite my good intentions, and back in the day, my parents did it. They had a Christmas fund. They would put a little money in there starting at the beginning of the year every month. And, it worked. It worked. And then they didn't get into a bunch of debt. Yeah,
that's right. And before you know it, I mean, what struck me over the years is that it's something, once you set it up, you don't really have to think about it. And you'd be surprised how much accumulates. Like you look at it 6 months, 12 months, especially if it's in an interest bearing account or an investment account that appreciates over time, you really can amass just a substantial sum of money by paying yourself first in that way. And then the one of the goals of paying yourself first is to build a freedom fund. So I call it's basically a fund that allows you to make choices and life decisions that are in your best interest, so that you don't have to be encumbered by debt. You don't have to feel trapped by a job. You don't have to feel trapped by a toxic relationship, whatever the case may be. So it's not just an emergency fund, although we should develop emergency funds as well, because as you just mentioned, things happen. But it's truly a fund that says, you know what, if I don't need this job, I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. If I'm laid off, I mean, there have been so many layoff announcements in the past few weeks alone. If you're laid off for a job, you know that you have that security for yourself and your family for 6 to 12 months. If you want to do an entrepreneurial venture, maybe you have some kind of month-to-month expense money to tide you over while you're figuring things out. So paying yourself first and building a freedom fund are kind of, to me, the two fundamental steps in having these quick money tricks for women.
and let's talk a little bit about paying yourself first too, because I mean, before it was a little bit trickier having to set up different accounts. People would set up different accounts and do things like that. But can't you now, aren't there apps or other ways to simply do that?
Dr. Mo, you raise a great point. There are apps like mint.com. for when I'm a little old school, I like spreadsheets. I like,
Excel.
going through my, Excel, Google
columns.
Columns, and I can color them. But the point really is that do what works for you. So if you're not a spreadsheet type of gal, fine, go to mint.com. To your point, find apps that make it easier for you to kind of aggregate, have this aggregated view of your money, to see what's happening. So yes, use technology, use paper. if you're analog, like I sometimes am, use paper, but there's no one way to do it. The most important thing is that you do it. And that you also keep an eye on your money, because that's my third money tip. So the idea is not to have these accounts and then never look at them. You should be reviewing account balances periodically. You should look at your interest rates. What are your APRs? Are they what you think they are? There may have been one thing, 3 or 4 months ago, but now the Fed has raised rates.
Right. I had one go up that I've had for like 20 years. Normally it's just a little bit above whatever the Fed have said. And it was all of a sudden it was double digits. And I called them and they said it was because I had not used it.
Interesting.
They wanted me in debt. I was like, are you kidding me? It was my, vacation emergency kind of thing. And I said, this is not incentive. If that's what you're thinking, that's going to make me use it. I use it just enough to keep it. But
that's right.
Yeah. Had I not been looking though, it was just another statement that came. And when I got ready to use that card, I would have been surprised.
Exactly. So you were keeping an eye on your money. You were looking at the rates before you went and used that card. So you knew what you were getting into.
And they lowered it. With that phone call.
That's great.
They lowered it. Not back where it was, but they lowered it.
Yeah. So. And they will do that. I mean, that's another great point, which is a lot of times people think, you're bound to these terms, and sometimes you are, but it's always worth calling to see, can you get a rate lowered? Can you get a late fee waived if you got a late fee? Can you get your rewards currency reinstated if for some reason you lost it because of a late payment or some such thing? You really have to be an active advocate for yourself and your money. Because if you stay silent, they're happy, all of the financial services companies are happy for you to be silent and to take your money, but you really have to advocate for yourself in that way. And it starts with keeping an eye on your money and knowing what's going on with it.
Good point. Point. Great. So with the, what was I trying to say? You gave us 3 points so far.
Yeah.
What are the other two?
Other ones are finding sustainable sources of income. So if you're employed, you're gainfully employed, you have a single sustainable source of income, but in order to kind of build wealth, you have to have that income flowing constantly. So making sure that it is, able to support the lifestyle that you're living. If it's not able to support the lifestyle that you're living, making sure that you're living within your means until you can get to a point where you're increasing your income. And then finally diversifying your income streams to the degree you can. Yes, you want to have a sustainable source of income, but you should always, and I know throughout my life, I've always been, looking for new opportunities to generate other kinds of income. And it can be passive income, can be, investment or
portfolio income.
Portfolio income, royalties, if you're in an industry where you can obtain royalties, but, you can develop a side hustle. You can, really take inventory of your talents, of your gifts, of the ways in which you want to spend your time to develop other means of income. And I think this has two effects. One, it allows you to just have more income, but it also allows you to not be reliant on any single source of income.
Which is stressful.
That's exactly right. It's stressful. And I find that times when I have been singularly reliant on a single source of income, sleepless nights, stress, mood, bad moods. It's like, it just psychologically, it's not the best place for us to be for sake of our wellness.
Right. And stress is a killer. And we saw it, during this downturn in the recent pandemic. And so many people, you're just wondering, you're seeing customers aren't coming in, or the government has shut down your business. And all of a sudden you realize the importance diversified, I believe in multiple streams of income and multiple streams of happiness, because you can do the same thing with a relationship.
That's
put,
exactly.
put all your happiness in there. You're neglecting the friends and the parents and the sisters and the brothers, and you lose it. And it's like, oh my goodness, I'm just out here swinging in the wind. And the same thing with the funds. So those are very, very good tips. And I like the way you present it too. I thought you were going to be all bougie and stuff, but you really.
I may have gone to Harvard, but I'm from Brooklyn, so.
That's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, don't let these letters fool you. I will go Fort Worth on you so hard. So hard.
Sorry, don't be fooled. Don't be fooled, people.
Don't be fooled. Oh, this is fun. Let's talk about building generational wealth. And it's come up a few times on the show, but often in those conversations, people just kind of take it for granted that it's going to happen, that everyone has that mindset of my heirs and long-term planning and financial literacy. But a lot of people think I made it on my own. I left the house when I was 17. My parents didn't help me. I'm spending everything on me, and these kids and grandkids can figure it out. What is wrong with that mentality? Why is generational wealth important?
Look, it is a mindset, and everyone, reasonable minds can differ and everyone has their own opinion. But in my view, why do we want our future generations to keep starting over and over again? Who wins when, and especially if you think women, you think people of color, you think Black people, who really wins when my kids, my future grandkids, their kids have to constantly start over? You can't take it with you. Okay. And so to me, that's a foundational thing. I cannot take it with me. And if I have people in this life whom I care about, I want them to be cared for after I leave. And frankly, while I understand that some people feel, oh, I did it on my own, I struggled, I started from scratch, I don't want that. Even if that's the case, I don't want that for the people I love. I don't want that for my children and for their grandchildren. So my goal, and so much of what I do is really driven by my need to make it easier for them. Not that they won't have to work, but that the starting point for their work will be further ahead than it was for me, and further ahead than it would have been otherwise had I not provided for them. I think it's also an important lesson in terms of mindset, in passing on not only the money, but passing on the mindset of wealth, of how you build wealth, of work, of what it means to work, of how you work smart, of how you get your money to work for you. My children are fairly young. I have 3 children under 10, but I talk to them, the 2 that can understand money. I also have a 2-year-old who has no concept of that, but the 2 who can understand the concepts of money, I talk to them about money a lot, not to be obsessed with it, but so that they understand the value of things. They understand choices. They understand, if you get an Xbox, then that's something that you're not going to get, right? There's that's money going out the door, but it's also replacing something else that maybe you could have gotten. So I think just integrating into our families these conversations around money, around wealth, around how people make their money. My oldest came to me, he's 9 now. He said, oh, Jeff Bezos, he's the richest man. He was at that moment. I know that the top 2 or 3 move quite frequently, but at that point he was the richest man. And I said, well, how did he make his money? Right? Because it's one thing to know that somebody is rich, he's a billionaire. How did he make his money? What was his path? What innovation did he come up with to change the world and make an impact on the world? And I think these are all things that are just so important for us to embrace and for us to pass on. I really do.
I think that's fantastic. I love what you're doing with your children. I was so determined that my kids, have financial literacy, because the mistake too is that you think because people can make money, they know how to keep it. They know how to invest in it, which is why so many people who win the lottery end up broke, because they don't know money management. So I remember dragging mine to the financial planner if I went to the insurance company, and they were young and bored. And this was before everybody had, a little game in their hands, a little video game. But for me, I wanted them to see me interacting with professionals. I wanted to role model that. And I wanted them to understand that you get professional help if you want to do next level things. You can't do everything by yourself. You find people with expertise in that area, but so often the kids are left at home. People run around, they're doing these things and they think, oh, the kids will be bored. You know what? Much of adulthood is boring. It is quite boring, but
And
you
it's
have
not boring, it's stressful.
girl, boring, stressful.
Those are two options.
You have to have the discipline and the patience to do that so that you can get to the other things that you want to do. And Leslie, I'll just say, as you were talking, it occurred to me that we will pass down recipes, from generation to generation. We'll pass down old wives' tales,
Right.
but then we won't think about the importance of passing down assets. We're passing down those old wives' tales and wisdoms because we don't want them to make the same mistake of having to sleep in the bed you made and whatever happens with the dog and the cat and all that stuff my grandmother was saying. But we've got to give them a 360 inheritance and not just the things we say. So I am so glad you're out helping people and teaching people how to do this. What about, challenges? Because real talk right now with the inflation, with the economy, with the wage gap, there are some big financial challenges that everyone faces, but in particular, what are some top financial challenges that women face and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, well, you touched on it, Dr. Mo. The wage gap is, I don't know, almost criminal. That in 2022, yeah. 2022, okay, modern ages, that there is still, women are still making about 85% of what men make. It's just staggering, and it's creeped up a little bit. That gap has closed over the years, but we're not at a 1-to-1 match. So that is the first thing. But we're also 5 times more likely to live paycheck to paycheck. We're 80% more likely to fall into poverty in retirement. So it's almost as if what starts as the wage gap just kind of compounds over the course of our lives to make our financial stability less and less relative to our male counterparts. I actually saw a statistic that parents on average pay less allowance to girls than to boys.
Oh no.
Yes.
Wow.
I saw the statistic and reported on it on in a post. And I really do think that these things start very early on in terms of how we ingrain the understanding of money. Also another challenge, I think, is societal norms. So I think there are more societal norms, and studies have proven this as well, that say it's bad for women to be successful relative to their male counterparts, right? So it's supposedly bad for women to be successful, or if we're overly driven or overly ambitious, that's viewed as a negative thing.
Right.
And those societal norms also filter into the workplace. So it's kind of like, the wage gap, societal norms, and then career progression in the workplace, again, compounding to work against women. So women are sometimes, it's funny, I read an article the other day that said when women—
You read a lot.
I do read a lot.
I'm a writer, so I love that.
Are you really? Okay, good. I do read a lot. And you know what? It's not always like sitting down reading a novel or sitting down reading a book like I would like, but I do take in a lot of information. I'll say that wherever I can get it from.
And blogs and
wherever I can get it from.
TED Talks. Yes, ma'am. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, right. It informs how I talk about this stuff, but also informs my viewpoint as a woman progressing her career and navigating this life. But at any rate, I saw an article the other day about how the way women write, when it comes to performance review time in corporations, the way women write about themselves in the performance review relative to their male counterparts is often disadvantageous to their career progression. So we're more likely to be afraid that people will think we're overly confident, or that we're bragging, or that we're boasting. We're more likely to downplay our achievements. And then that also compounds and contributes to, lower raises, fewer promotional opportunities, less advancement, more,
and not asking for enough money right up front, not just taking whatever they offer, because males will counter.
That's right. Males will generally negotiate. And so it's so important to be aware. And it's been important for me to be aware of these things so that you can understand where our default is as women, and then counter, so that you always negotiate, that you're mindful of how you write your performance reviews, that sort of thing. And then finally, I think confidence. I saw a statistic that only 14% of women feel knowledgeable about retirement planning. And I think we're more likely to just not do something. When we don't feel confident or don't feel knowledgeable, we're more likely to just not do it. And I think, again, all of these challenges work together to disadvantage us over the course of our lives.
How do we, part of that wage gap, as you know, is that corporations won't be transparent about who's getting paid what, and then they admonish us. I've been self-employed for the longest. I'm with the corporation now, but they'll admonish you, don't discuss your salary. It's like, why? There's really no reason for that. If you're being fair and you're compensating people properly, then I would expect that somebody who's been here 20 years and has a high position makes more than me. But the guy who you hired 2 years after me, who has a similar role, should not be making more than me. That's right. And so those types of things, and I noticed with the new generations, millennials, Gen X, and I think I'm not supposed to say those terms anymore, but I noticed they are totally going against the grain with that and talking about it, and it's making companies have to review salaries, and sometimes it's a person in HR. It's not even always a systemic thing. So I'm that concerns me, because I have a granddaughter. Everything you just said resonates with me. I have 2 sons, 2 older grandsons, and then a young granddaughter. And wow, that's a whole different thing, Aurora. But someone referred to her when she was about 3. And she is assertive. She takes after her grandmother, but she was, kind of organizing the little play group. And someone said, "Oh, she's bossy." And I said, "No, she has executive leadership potential." That's right. That's right. What she has. She's a leader.
That's right.
That's what she is. And they kind of, drew back. But that's the other thing, is for us to intervene. When we hear things like that, those stereotypes and biases, there was no need to say that. She wasn't bullying anybody. She was just getting them organized. They were being random 3-year-olds. She wanted structure.
That's right. That's, and it's, I think you touched on a very important thing, Dr. Mo, which is, Carla Harris, who I've seen speak and read some of her books.
She's good. Yeah.
She's excellent. And she says, you got to call a thing a thing. So what you did in that moment is you called a thing a thing. And what I've had to do over the course of my career is call a thing a thing.
Yes. So, and don't laugh about it.
That's
don't
right. Like, just
ignore it. Roll your eyes.
That's right. That's right. Say, this is what it's happening. This is what it's called. It's called a microaggression. So you label it, you name it, you call it a thing, and you say, this is what's happening. And studies show that, Black women in the workplace are more likely to be perceived as, angry when they're simply expressing an opinion, or demanding when they're simply advocating for themselves or their teams. And so I think that's exactly right. What you did with Aurora in that situation, and what we all need to do is really empower ourselves to call a thing, and have that not be acceptable. And, what I found is that at first people may not get it, but when you reinforce it, eventually they will, or in the very least, eventually they'll stop doing it because they don't want to hear you complain.
Which is my thing. If you can't be supportive, be quiet. But that's exactly. You will not devalue me. That's not happening.
That's right. And then on the financial front, I think literacy and we have to educate ourselves about what it means to be financially well, financially independent, why it's important. There's so many resources out there. I mean, many more than when I was kind of in my teens and 20s. And I think there's greater awareness generally out there in the, in cyberspace. But we have to educate ourselves, and we have to not be, and you mentioned this earlier, afraid to ask for help. I first went to a financial advisor when I was in my 20s, and, I didn't have much to invest at that time, truth be told. And I ended up not actually engaging their services at that time, but just the advice that I got from that advisor put me in the mindset of, oh, this is how I should be thinking about my money. And so like later, I actually engaged the services of an advisor, but that's because I had been thinking about it and talking to people who do this for a living and doing research that was available to me in order to shore up my confidence and my understanding. So I think those are, we have to advocate for ourselves, empower ourselves, call a thing, as Carla Harris would say, negotiate for promotions, raises, knowing that even better to do it, even if the answer is no, because at least you're advocating for your worth and you're sending a very clear message that you know your worth and you're expecting them to know it as well.
Exactly. I want to circle back to what you said about the appraisals as well. I got out of dental school, went into private practice, did that a long time. And now there's been so much to learn about corporate. Like I thought EAP would help me with my password because they said employee assistance. I didn't know it was a mental health thing. I called, I was like, hey, I'm locked out.
I need assistance.
Right. The woman said, well, how does that make you feel? Like I'm feeling like I can't do my work.
I feel like I can't get into the system.
I have had to learn a lot in that time period, but oh man, I just keep doing this, forgetting what I was going to say because we started laughing. Oh, with the performance review. Thank you, Jesus. Yeah. With the performance review. So that was new to me. I was used to giving them for my staff, for my team, but not receiving one. And I just, I gave myself all fives because I felt like I put forth 110% effort. And so I remember my VP at the time, he was like, well, we really just give fives for exceptional work. You just should kind of stay down around the 3 or 4 level. I said, do you really want people on your team who know, who are really trying at an average level? I was like, I can't control what you're going to score, what you're going to put. But I feel like in these areas that I deserve a 5, and I'm not going to mark it down just because y'all have a curve. You do that on your own. Right. But I feel like, and I know too, because of what I know about psychology too, that it's going to be hard to just keep marking down somebody's
It's like eventually you just get to 0. Right. To negative numbers. It's like there's nowhere else to go.
No room to negotiate. Yeah, but that was just because I built up that confidence from having worked for myself. But if I had just come in from college or grad school or whatever, and he told me that, I probably would be giving myself 3s every year. I'm like, no, sir. I did 5 up in here.
That's right. But that's how, Dr. Mo, these things get ingrained in young women's heads very early on. Right. They're coming out of college. They want to make a good impression, and they get, either told directly or kind of by inference or by suggestion, or just by, osmosis, see that is not how we expect women in the workplace to operate. And you will not succeed if you operate that way. And then that same person, that same woman goes through her career and continues operating in a way that really is not advantageous to her, and in a way that her male counterpart is not operating, because men generally do not operate like that.
Then she's mentoring the new hire and giving her the same advice that she was giving. Girl, we're getting ready to do our appraisals. Let me tell you, just give yourself 3s. They like that.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
It's we can grow together.
Yeah, I was talking about something similar about but it was about applying for jobs. So, we talked about negotiating promotions, but also just apply, like going for the job you want, even though you're not 100% qualified for it. And in one of my former employers, a VP came to speak to our team, and he had just been newly appointed to the role he was in. And he was talking about his interview process. And he said, he said this in the interview, and he was telling us about it, that he said, what I know about this area, I could fit on the back of a postage stamp.
Wow.
I just remember being like, what? Wow. I would never apply for a job where like all I knew about it, I could fit on the back.
Right. I almost want to feel overqualified.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Right.
And much like if for some reason in a moment of madness I did, I would never go into an interview and say it. Okay. Oh, no. I would research and read up and, prepare, and he got the job. And to me, that is just like demonstrates the difference between kind of your male corporate workplace mindset and your female corporate workplace mindset.
Yeah, I would have, and we'd be excluded if we did say that. We would
be like next
out of consideration, and that would be quoted.
That's
this
right.
person
That's
said
right. That's
they
right.
don't know. They don't know how to do the job. This isn't discrimination. Look, right here, her words.
Right.
She said she didn't know how to do it. That's a really interesting example. Yeah. And you see that all the time. People come in without the experience, but they had the courage to and the confidence to apply, which goes back to how differently we've been raising our boys and girls. And I'm glad that's changing too.
Yeah, me too.
Well, our last topic here is, and this is so much fun. How can you be your authentic professional self and still find a place in the corporate world where people are still having to file lawsuits over natural hair and hijabs or head coverings?
Yes.
How do you do that?
So, I've had cause to think about this a lot over the course of my career. And just because, to your point, there's just so much in the news and that sort of thing about it. And people generally see the workplace and corporations as somewhere where you have to fit in. And I think firstly, we have to change that mindset, each and every one of us, because in my mind, it's more like a relationship, right? So you meet someone, and if I meet someone, my job isn't necessarily to fit in with what my husband thinks I should be. Our job is to meld together based on our mutual chemistry.
Right.
And so part of embracing your authenticity is that, look, at some point in my career, Dr. Mo, it came to a point where I was like, if I'm not being my authentic self, I am not going to be happy. I'm going to feel stifled. I'm going to feel suffocated. I'm going to be depressed. That's not good for my wellness. So really, you just have to embrace and say, look, I want to be in a environment, whether it's a corporate environment, a familial situation, a relationship that suits me and where we suit each other. So I would almost say, as you're looking for jobs, as you're interviewing for jobs, yes, you're trying to demonstrate what you know and that you could fit in, but you're also interviewing your prospective employer and saying, is this a place that will be supportive of my authenticity, right? And so to me, that's the first thing. And then what does it really mean to be authentic? Because, we talk about it a lot. And I don't know if you've read the book. It's a children's book, The Velveteen Rabbit. It's kind of a children's book, but to me, it's like an allegory that all adults should read, whether or not they have kids. And the Velveteen Rabbit, as you know, didn't become a real rabbit. He was real once he had been tattered, played with, torn, loved, thrown away. And so in my mind, authenticity, when I say authenticity, and I talk to folks about this, I say, be real. That's how you be a good leader. That's how you be a good colleague. That's how you be a good steward in your role, because you are a combination of not just the good stuff, everything you've been through,
absolutely,
your experiences, everything you bring to the role. And so we should all feel empowered to bring that to everything we do. Now, obviously, you want it to be appropriate for the workplace. Like I don't interact with my team in the same way I interact with my husband or my boss the same way I interact with my kids. But I am always an authentic version of myself in everything I do, because again, it got to a point where it's like, if I'm going to continue to do this and do this for 20, 30 more years, it became a necessity, frankly. Like I have to show up as my authentic self. Otherwise, I just won't be happy.
And that's part of that imposter syndrome. It's not just that, people always think, well, I don't feel good enough to be here. It's also that I could do so much more and I'm having to suppress it. I think I have to suppress it to fit in, whether it's my ideas or my style or my humor or whatever. And that I see changing. Thankfully, it's never fast enough for me, but I'm glad things are getting better. And conversations like this, I think, are facilitating that growth and that change. So if people want to learn more about, you've shared some good tips here today. If they want to learn more or connect with you online, what is your website? And are you on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter?
I'm everywhere, folks. So
she's omnipresent.
I'm omnipresent, ubiquitous. So you can visit SibongileNgako.com. You can find me on Instagram at Sibongile Ngako. I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. So please feel free to reach out, send me a message. I'm always curious to hear what women especially are wrestling with. Because I have perspectives and it feels like I've experienced just about everything. And I'm so happy to try to make other folks' lives easier if I can.
Awesome. And thank you for passing those experiences forward to help others grow. And, there's a legacy there, and you are just amazing. So I appreciate your continued success.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Dr. Mo. I appreciate it.